This week on Quality Digest Live, what can Humpty Dumpty tell us about the functional separation of work?
Plus, we'll examine a possible paradigm shift in U.S. car ownership. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for February 15th, 2013. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Okay, well, interesting story this week that is, in some ways, tweaking a few people, maybe, just because it puts forth an idea that very often people don't like. And this was a story by John Flagg dealing with stoplight control panels. And basically, a lot of you are familiar with this. Rather than use a control chart, very often you'll have a piece of software that would generate like a stoplight, green, yellow, red, indicating whether a process might be out of control or not. And one of the problems that people point out with this, well, number one, there's a couple. Very often you'll get false yellows or false reds because they're not really looking at the information the same way you would look at a control chart if you would to normally look at it. And because of that, very often it causes people to tamper. Oh, I've got a red light, so I got to go out and fix my process and do something to it, when really that isn't the case. So John Flagg talks about that type of stoplight, and then he recommends a better type of stoplight, one that is based not only on control limits, but also on the specification limits. And his version of stoplight, or that type of stoplight, I don't think he designed it, but when he's talking about, takes into consideration the spec limits as well as the control limits, and then generates a green, yellow, red stoplight. Now, there were a few people who didn't like this. I think Rip Stoffer may have commented on it. A lot of people don't like stoplights because their argument is like, look, why don't you just read a control chart? I mean, the control chart has all the information you need. You don't need a green, yellow, red. You simply look at the control chart and all the data is right there in front of you. The problem with this, and I believe John is right on this, this is great if you've got one or two control charts. But suppose you're trying to monitor a dozen processes or 24 processes. If you're a large plant, you may be monitoring 50 processes. Are you going to look at a glance, look at 50 control charts and go, oh, yeah, okay, what's going on? That's the purpose. The whole reason stoplights came around is to give you a quick indication that something may be wrong. To me, the problem with stoplights is not stoplights, it's how they're used. They should be a warning. They should be just an indication that, hey, you've got a yellow, you've got a red, there may be something wrong with your process. Go take a look at the data. Don't act on the stoplight. Use the stoplight as a warning, like the check engine light on your car. Now go and check, dig into the data, and see what you got going. So basically what John's saying here is, look, there's a better way to do stoplights. Here's how to do it. And I'm saying you still got to use them right. I disagree with Rip. I don't think there's a problem with stoplights. I do think there's a problem with trying to like bring a manager up to speed on how to read control charts and then expect them to be reading control charts all the time as opposed to having a dashboard which might give them an indication that something's up.
Yeah. Well, I think Rip is right, though. I think that the better way to do it, depending on what your situation is to be able to read a control chart and understand what's really going on with the process. But the issue is, I think that Rip's addressing is that making it red, green, yellow, when that red pops up, the human nature, especially amongst management, is going to be, we got to do something. We got to do something. And yes, I understand the way that John is addressing this is a better way. But it's still going to lead to the same problem, where there's going to be tampering.
But to me, then it's like you gotta. Then you train them. Don't do. I mean, here's a question. Okay, you have a smoke alarm in your house, right?
Sure.
So when that smoke alarm goes off, and it goes off all the time. We always have a smoke alarm.
Sure.
What do? What's the first thing you do when you're smoking?
I check it to make sure.
So you don't go running outside, grab your wife, go running outside in your underwear, and call the fire department. Say, hey, my house is burning down. You don't do that.
Okay.
No,
fair point.
It beeps, you go, oh, it's a little scary, you go check it out. And then if there's a fire, well, you deal with it. If there's not, you ignore it. unscrew it from the from the ceiling, and you put it in the drawer, and you never install it again. So that's what everybody.
Remind me not to come to your house during.
But that's my point. Is to me that's the way stoplights should be used.
Yep.
Is they're not something to act on other than the action to be. Get me all the data on this process so I can look at it, really look at the data, and then make an assessment as to whether I need to do something.
It's one of those issues where there's compelling arguments on both sides. I understand what John is saying here, and what he's addressing is a better way to do it.
Right.
I also understand what Rip's response was, which is kind of an older school response of, hey, read the control charts, plot the dots, and do that. So fair argument on both sides. Good articles. Check that one out. That's below the player page, like the rest of the stories we're going to be covering on today's show. And I have an interesting story that I wanted to cover. Actually, it's not from me. It's from MIT News, which reports that sustainability is not just good for the planet, it's good for corporate bottom lines as well, or at least it could be. That's the message from a recent survey conducted by the MIT Sloan Management Review Business Journal in conjunction with the Boston Consulting Group. The report, titled The Innovation Bottom Line, was based on a survey of more than 2,600 business executives and managers from across the globe. And across the globe is going to be important in the story, as I indicate very shortly. The most notable data point to come out of the survey in my mind was that 37% of the companies surveyed reported a profit, a direct profit, from their sustainability efforts. That's more than 20% better than last year's study. They've done the study for a couple of years in a row now. So more than a 20% improvement in those that are reporting direct profitability from sustainability efforts. That's pretty interesting. Furthermore, the findings show that nearly half of the companies surveyed have changed their business model in response to opportunities involving sustainability. Again, that's better than a 20% increase from last year.
So, in other words, sustainability is a topic, and it's gaining traction, and people are doing something about it.
And they're tracking direct profits from it. They're improving their bottom line.
Which is the main thing that drives any kind of
change or improvement. Exactly. Right. Now, one of the most intriguing pieces of information to come from the study was this one. Companies in emerging markets changed their business model in response to issues of sustainability far more often than those in the first world. Respondents from North America in particular showed a resistance to sustainability business model innovation.
Interesting.
So why? Why the resistance from North American companies? Well, I think, and they didn't mention this in the survey, but I think it's maybe because they see the cost of sustainability initiatives, but not the benefits, which are sometimes are soft benefits.
Right.
And they can include things like increased market share, energy efficiency, and competitive advantage. So American companies are really all about the bottom line, and they're going to want to go to the bottom line as quickly as possible, and they're going to want to address that. So,
was this American companies or Western companies?
They specifically referenced North American companies.
I think there's another issue.
Okay.
I think we just don't like being told what to do. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's like, oh, you're going to have to, monitor your greenhouse gas emissions, or you're going to have to involve yourself in sustainability or social responsibility. You don't tell me what to do. I mean, that's not the way it's done in America.
Yeah. Okay.
And I really think that. I mean, I'm being facetious here, but not too much.
Yeah, not too much. Yeah. I think you're on it, and those cost benefit analyses, it's easy to track the costs for that. It's hard to track these benefits, as I said. It's kind of similar to lean, where the waste, until you really roll up your sleeves and look at it, it's hard to see the waste. It's not right in front of your face many times.
Yeah.
So this is a big issue. I think this is an issue that for a lot of these companies who aren't doing sustainability, who aren't doing sustainable initiatives, green initiatives, whatever it may be, they have to understand, and they have to be shown maybe a survey like this helps them see that the benefits are there, and you have to stick with it. You can't just do it as a flavor of the month. You have to stick with it.
Right. I mean, I think, obviously, anytime you can show the benefits, initially I think there's resistance because, like I said, I think people just don't like being told how to run their business, right? Sustainability, whatever, it's going to cost me money to do that and whatever. But if you can show the bottom line results, then I think most people are smart. They want to make their bottom line better.
Well, and I think it helps if you make it part of your marketing plan too. If you communicate that to your user base that, hey, we're a sustainable company. It's important to you. It's important to us. Let's partner with it. That will help build business. I think,
that's actually another. There's also kind of the customer perception thing that you want, which works in your favor. So
absolutely. Okay. So anyway, for more on that story and the rest of them, again, just below the player page right there, you can check them out.
There you go. Trip Babbitt wrote an interesting article this week that uses the poem of Humpty Dumpty. We all know that one. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and etc. And he used that as an example of companies that have functionally separated their work. These companies group similar tasks together, which shatters any cohesive workflow, is what Tripp is saying. For service industries especially, this can be really counterproductive. And I think what he's talking about here is silos, right? I mean, work silos.
He is. And actually, you know, back up a minute from the service industry thing, because really what he started talking about here was going back in history a little bit to the days of Frederick Winslow Taylor, and looking at time motion management studies, time management, and trying to understand in an industrial setting, not necessarily in a service industry, but in an industrial setting, putting stuff together, you know, turning screws and widgets and things. That Winslow Taylor really first began to break things down into pieces, to look at it, to analyze the time that it took to do something, and then to look how it could be done better. So that, which was very successful, you know, 100 years ago, really began to proliferate throughout industry, and now it's proliferating in a lot of service industries, and it's caused what Deming refers to as sub-optimization in a lot of these areas, where we've broken the pieces apart so much, like Humpty Dumpty, we've put it, it's fallen up, it's broken in pieces, and now we can't put it back together again. We can't have a systems approach, as Tripp always talks about, to doing that, and have it work and have it flow, and it's really a lean thing too.
I think what he's saying, or at least my interpretation of this, is that you may have individual silos which run really well, but then they don't mesh with the other silos, and so then you've just created a whole new problem.
You know, he talks about it from the perspective of IT, and he talks about it also from the perspective of software engineering, as software engineers. And I know that's an area that you have some experience in.
Software engineering a little bit, but I'd say more hardware engineering from my electronics days. I mean, I would imagine it hasn't changed a whole lot, but typically what we used to do, the way engineering department would work, is you'd get a requirement from sales, or you might get a requirement from, I very often worked in startup companies, so the lead innovator, the lead designer would have a bright idea for a which, by the way, sometimes there's a disconnect between the bright idea and sales. I got this great thing you can build, and the sales guy's going, yeah, and what?
Who wants it, right?
Who wants it? In any case, one of those guys, they come to engineering and they say, build me a black box. Here's the inputs, here's the outputs. And engineering goes, awesome. I'm going to put on my engineering hat and dig right in, because that's what we like to do. We like to engineer and build things. But usually we wouldn't really talk with the salespeople to make sure we got all of what their customer is requiring. And we almost never talked to manufacturing until the whole design was done, and it got kicked over to manufacturing and say, okay, build it. And manufacturing goes, what? We can't build this. What are you talking about?
Or we can. It's going to take forever.
Yeah, or we can. As long as you don't mind taking 2 days per unit. And that is very typical. Is you can have a very streamlined manufacturing. You can have a sales force that is great, and they respond to customer requirements. And then you have your engineering team, which is great at what they do, which is designing and building. But nobody's working as a whole to make sure that from design to finish, your product has fluidity throughout the process, and that the design requirements for the customer are being met in the design that the engineers are building, and what the engineers are passing off to manufacturing can actually be built by manufacturing and built efficiently. We used to. Now, I don't know if that still works that way, but I got a feeling it probably still does.
Sure does. And you know, Tripp talks about it from a service industry perspective too, and he talks about like call centers, for instance, where you know he mentions in his piece that there was he had an example of some customer that called 25 times trying to resolve a problem, and that's a heck of a dedicated customer. I mean, eventually that person's going to say, to heck with this.
I'm done.
But the reason why that is because the customer service person who dealt with that call either didn't want to or didn't have the authority to push it through to its conclusion. There was a silo approach. Well, I'm going to deal with it, and I'm going to push it on to the next stage. Paperwork's issued, and somebody else is going to deal with it after that. The problem never gets resolved. I mean, these silos cause a lack of customer satisfaction. And the customer may know really well what he or she wants, but if the people that are serving them can't push it through to the conclusion, you're going to destroy your customer relationships.
So Tripp's whole point is, always as usual with Tripp, systems approach. You have to look at the entire organization as a system.
Yeah.
You know, what is your product, whether it's a service product or a tangible product? You've got to look at your entire system that goes into making that product, and you've got to treat it as a system as a whole, and all the parts have got to work efficiently on their own, but they also have to work efficiently with each other.
Good point. Yep. Yes, and thanks Trip for that. And you know, Trip, this is his theme. So Trip will always kind of bring it back to that eventually, right. And it's a good one. It's one that we should, I think, be aware of.
Right. And interesting, great story from our own Taryn March.
From our own Taryn March, The Road Not Taken, which actually was not by Robert Frost. I thought when I read it first it was Two Roads Diverging Yellow. No, it was by Taryn March, our own Taryn March, a couple of weeks ago. The Road Not Taken, which is, as you would maybe imagine, is about the automotive industry. And the automotive industry, of course, is always an interest of ours because we have a lot of our readers, a lot of you out there, work in the auto industry and associated suppliers of the auto industry. And in this piece, Taryn presents a fascinating and for some, maybe kind of a nightmarish as well, scenario where she talks about the fact that young people in their teens and 20s and even some in their 30s aren't buying cars anymore. They aren't buying new cars, certainly, and they're not even buying used cars as much as they used to. And, you know, that's going to be an issue for automotive manufacturers, right? I mean, certainly in North America it is. There's a couple of points she looks at here that kind of underline what she's talking about. Now, the number of 16-year-olds getting their license is down dramatically from what it was just a couple of decades ago. Now, I know that the minute I turned, well, in Jersey at that time it was 16 and a half, but I remember the minute I turned 16 and a half, I was like, I'm getting my license.
You're out there, yeah.
You know, that was 1980 something. But in any event, it was, you know, it was an important thing for me. I look forward to that for probably a year or two before that happened. I was like ready to start driving. But it's down dramatically from where it was just a couple of decades ago. Another point she points out, new cars sold to young people are also down drastically from 3 decades ago, from the mid-'80s, that young people just aren't buying cars, new cars or used cars. Another thing is that automotive brands, this is an interesting one, automotive brands are not anywhere in the top 10 of most recognized brands amongst young people. And there was a survey that she references where they looked at the brands that people recognize, and there were no auto brands. It wasn't Ford, GM, Honda, none of them were up there. So this is a concern as well. So why? Why is this? What are the reasons for this issue? Well, it's a couple ones. First, to quote Bill Clinton and his team, it's the economy, stupid. The economy's not great. Yeah. The economy's not great. And in this economy that we're in right now, I think it's even harder for young people than maybe in past economic tough times because they can't get jobs. Many of them are still living at home. Many of them are paying off humongous college debts. And, you know, car is expensive. I mean, you look at buying a car, even a used car, gas prices are high, of course. Car insurance for young people is ridiculously expensive. If you're living in a city, parking your car is horribly expensive. It could be $500 a month to park your car. So the costs of that are such that it's not going to be an incentive for people to want to buy cars. Another thing, despite what Bill Levinson said a few weeks ago in an article that he wrote, a lot of young people are moving to cities. That's where the jobs are. Right. And cities are hip, they're cool. I mean, I lived outside of the city for a while.
And they've got mass transit.
And they got mass transit, they got buses, they got trains. I mean, you don't need to have a car. And if you do, again, if you have a car in San Francisco, it's going to cost you $500 or more a month to park there.
To park it, yeah. Exactly.
Just to park it, not even to operate it, right? Yeah. So why would you do that? Why would you do that when you have mass transit that's reliable? Yeah. The response of the auto industry to this, I think, is really interesting as well, because they've taken a few actions here that I think are going to help. One is personalization of design requirements. So otherwise, they're letting young people who dig this kind of stuff, I dig it too, but young people have more freedom in terms of having to design what they want in a car, the features and the functionalities and the colors and the fabrics and all that kind of stuff. So it's not so much, well, here's the box we're offering you and you have a couple of choices within that. It's going to be a lot more of a choice. They're changing the way they're branding and marketing and reaching out to young people. You know, there's a lot of intimidation that goes into the car buying process, especially if you're young.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Where negotiation alone is stressful. Yeah. For many young people, especially young ladies, maybe getting into a car with a stranger and going for a test drive might be unsettling, yeah. a little scary. So the automotive manufacturers are changing that a little bit too. And then, I think most interesting of all, there's been a continuing integration of technology into automotive. And Ford in particular is launching a Silicon Valley research lab, which is promising, quote unquote, I'm going to read this, uncompromised mobility experiences which sounds great. I think what that means is that
really cool stuff in your car.
In your car. Well, I think it's gonna combine some of the telecommunication mobility with your car experience, so you can do things within your car, probably from your dash or from your steering wheel, and maybe you can maybe verbally post to your Facebook what you're doing and where you are. Who the heck knows? I don't know, but it's cool, and it's good they're thinking about that, because that's what young people are into, right?
Call Facebook.
Yeah, call Facebook. Tell them I'm driving.
Yeah, I'm driving.
What are you doing now?
Yeah, Twitter.
That's right.
I'm driving. I'm still driving.
I'm still driving. Maybe there'll be little webcams on your car that can see where you're driving to and
I'm
from.
turning off the freeway.
That would be cool. But the takeaway here, to get serious for a minute, because I know you hate that, Dirk, but to get serious for a minute, the takeaway really here is that there's nothing new under the sun, and industries like cars change rather slowly, and unlike some other industries like software and telecom and media, which change very quickly and need to respond very quickly to customer demands, automotives have changed slowly in the past, maybe not so much anymore. And I think that you're going to see it change and continue to change more quickly, and their response to it is going to have to change more quickly if they want to continue to keep their customer base. And is this a doomsday scenario for automotive manufacturers? It certainly can seem that way, but I think that ultimately it's not going to be, because they're going to respond to it, and they're going to respond to it in the right way, and they're going to be able to adjust. And hey, Darwinism is alive and well in product manufacturing and marketing as it is in everything else. So I think it's a good story. Thank you for Taryn for giving that to us in the end. You can check out more about that right below the player page right there. Okay, we're going to move on now, and we have a very interesting tech corner that Dirk's going to present here in a moment from FFD Inc. And the product is the Sequence Enterprise Kaizen module for iPad. And Dirk is going to give us a tech corner demo on it right now. Take it away, Dirk.
Right. Thanks, Mike. Well, look, I think all of you would probably recognize that one of the biggest problems with getting continuous improvement ideas from the shop floor into the system is the system. I mean, if you think about it, you're an assembler, you're a machinist, whatever. You work on the shop floor, you have a bright idea. You're assembling something, or you're working on something, you have this bright idea. Hey, this would make my job easier. But to get your idea into the system, you have to do paperwork, or you have to bring your manager over, show them what you're doing. It all has to be documented, and so on and so forth. And if it's a really big idea, maybe you'll go through the hassle. What if it's just a little idea? If I just did this one little thing, it'd make my job easier. But it's not that big a deal. I'm not going to worry about it. I don't want to jump through these hoops. I got my job to do. Right? So in a sense, that kind of quashes continuous improvement ideas, the little ones. And a bunch of little ideas are great. You want a bunch of little ideas. Well, what if you can make it easy for people on the shop floor, without leaving their workstation, to get their bright ideas into the system? Well, that is the idea behind a new module for the Sequence Enterprise software, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It's called the Sequence Enterprise Kaizen module for iPad, and actually it'll work on any device. It's web-based, so we're going to have it on an iPad today, but you could actually use that on any device. And the idea behind it is Sequence software. If you've remembered, we talked about this before. Is a piece of software for developing and deploying work instructions to the shop floor. It's completely electronic. At your workstation, you might have a laptop or a notebook or a desktop computer, whatever. You're getting your work instructions for whatever product right at your workplace. And of course, because they're electronic, they're always the most up-to-date version. So this is a module that goes with that. And we'll talk a little bit about how that works. So if we switch over, let's say, to the gauge cam here. So let's say I'm an assembler, and this is a device that I build. This is a device that I assemble. This is called a microscope translator. This, I believe, moves a lens or a turret back and forth. And this is what I'm building. So this is what my work instructions might look like. I'm going to put my iPad here in front of it. Open it up. So this is what I would have at my workstation. This is the Sequence Enterprise software. And on the left-hand side, these are my work instructions. These are the written instructions for each step. And this is a picture that might go along with it. So typically I would start from the top and work my way all the way through. And there's my first step. There's a description, a picture. Here's the fourth step down. Here's a description. There's a picture, and so forth. But what I'm interested in is this last little bit. And this is install the switch. Now let me get back to my device here. So as an assembler, what I'm seeing is I'm installing this switch, and I notice when I'm done, what I have is this assembly with this loose wire hanging off. Now I've been talking to my friend Jane, who is the one who installs this assembly in a larger assembly. And she says, you know, one of the problems is every time I install this, or a lot of times, this wire gets hung up on part of my assembly, and it gets nicked, and I have to replace the harness, or sometimes it gets snagged, and the wire gets torn off the switch, and we have to resolder it back on. Man, what a pain, and it takes time. So, as the one responsible for this assembly, I have a bright idea. I go, you know, if we were just to put a tie wrap sticky on there, and we were to tie wrap this harness to the assembly, we would accomplish a couple of things. We would accomplish a couple of things. And I'll just trim this off. Number one, we'd be providing strain relief for the cable. And also, because it's nice and compact, when we go to install this, it's going to have less likelihood of snagging. What a simple solution. So here I am. I'm this assembler. I've got this bright idea. Now, how do I get this bright idea, which is really simple, into the system? Well, here's what I do. Remember, I've got my work instructions already in front of me. I'm on this last step, install switch. So I'm going to submit a note. And in that note, I'm going to type in what I think a good idea would be, which would be to install tie wrap sticky and tie wrap the harness. And not only that, I'm going to take a picture of it. So I'm going to, down here, I'm going to click Browse. Oh, sorry about that. Browse, take a photo or video, and I'm going to put this right in front of the camera, and I am going to take a picture, there we go, of what I just did. And there we go. And now you can see, there's my picture that I just took of my assembly there. I'm going to use that. I'm going to upload it. I'm going to submit it. Submit it. And there we go. I'm done. That took what? A couple of minutes, a minute and a half. I have this bright idea. I submit it back I put it into the system, and now I'm done. I can go on with my job. I didn't have to leave and go grab a manager. I didn't have to fill out any paperwork. And more important, the context of everything I did is already there. Remember, if I fill out a piece of paper, I have to put my name, I have to put the assembly number, the model number onto it. I have to describe everything. I have to supply the context. Because the assembler is already logged into the system, it knows who she is. It knows what product she's working on. It knows what step in the assembly she's on. All she had to do was type in a description and take a picture, and that's it. Now she moves on. Now what happens on the back end? Well, on the back end, at the same time that she emailed this, submitted it, an email was sent to whichever manager is in charge of maybe that product line or those assembly instructions or whatever. An email was sent to them saying, hey, somebody has submitted a suggestion. So if we go to our screen share here, what happens for them is they'll get an email message, and they'll come out here to the back end of the Sequence enterprise software, and they'll go to that part, and they'll see a flag there. And oops, let me update my screen here because I'm. Yeah, exactly. They'll see a flag. They'll go down to the switch. They'll see a flag, and well, I'm sorry. I had to update my screen. Typically, they would. There we go. Sorry about that. Left out one of my steps. So they're going to drill down into their assembly. To their install switch. And there's some notes. And there is the note that she installed. I'm not sure if you can read it on your screen, but there's the note that she typed, install tie wrap sticky and tie wrap the harness. And if we open this up, you'll see there is the picture that she took from her screen. So now I'm the manager. I can review this. I can go, okay, I like this idea. This is interesting. I like what she's saying here. So let's go ahead and do something with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new step. And I'm just going to create a new step on the procedure, and I'll call it install tie wrap. And I'll go back to her note. Here's her notes here. And, oops, wrong note. This note. And I will copy her text. And I'll come back into my work instruction here that I just now created. And I'll type in her text or copy in her text. Maybe I'll add some more text of my own, fix any grammar mistakes or whatever. And you know, I liked her image, so I'm just going to drag this image down as well. And now her description and her image are now part of this, pending approval, are part of this work instruction. So now all that's happened is this now goes through an approval process, an electronic approval process similar to what you have on any kind of document control system. And once it's approved, the next time she goes out to build that product and she brings up her work instruction, that's going to be there. Now think about what this did. It allowed her to take a very simple idea, which maybe she wouldn't have mentioned to anybody because it was just kind of in passing and it's such a simple thing to do and she doesn't want to be hassled. It was so easy to do. She put that idea into the system. So imagine you had everybody on the shop floor that easily being able to contribute continuous improvement ideas to the system. Imagine how much great ideas you would be getting out of that. Not just the big ones, but the little ones. And really, seriously, on the shop floor, big ideas are great, but I guarantee you, you get a lot more mileage out of the hundreds of little ideas that people have on the top of their heads every single day. So that's what you want to facilitate, and that's what this software does. So once again, this is the Sequence Enterprise Kaizen module for iPad. As I said, it's web-based, so you can use it on anything. Part of the Sequence Enterprise software from FFD Incorporated. So great little product. Look it up. There's a link on the bottom of the screen down there. Back to you, Mike.
Yeah, there it is, FFD Inc. Thank you, everybody at FFD, for giving us that great tech corner. Sequence Enterprise Kaizen module for iPad. And you can see their website right there, sequencesoftware.com. Really interesting tech corner. Dirk, well done there.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it's interesting when you start to think. And by the way, I gotta say, Sequence was approached by a company for that very reason. Is they were using the Sequence software, and they were going, you know, we have these Kaizen events, and there's all these ideas. But, I mean, you know, we need an easier way to get these ideas into the system. The way we're doing it right now, just, it doesn't make sense. And that's why they came up with this module. But I think it obviously has a lot more usage other than Kaizen events. I think just day-to-day operation. You have an operator with an idea. They get it in the system.
That's right. So good stuff there. Hey, if any of you out there have an idea for Tech Corner that you want to see us feature, just write us at QDL@qualitydigest.com, and we'll get it on the show because we're always looking for good Tech Corners. We love doing those. All right. Well, that is our show for today, for February 15th. 2013. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you again to FFD for giving us a great Tech Corner.
Sequence Software.
Sequence Software, and thank you to Trip Babbitt, our own Taryn March, for John Flagg and MIT for giving us great content this week. Next week, another big week of content. We're going to have we're going to try this time to get Benny Fowler on the show for next week. We're hoping Benny Fowler of Ford should be able to join us a week from today. So look out for that, and another great week of content starting on Monday. So
That's right.
Look forward to seeing you then.
Have a great President's Day weekend.
That's right. Talk to you later.
So long.
Three, two, one, fire!